I'm tired of this. I'm tired of this presentation, right? I'm tired of my own face. I'm tired of the way that I see myself in these settings. Blank, mundane, with this backdrop of ideas I had 2 years ago. Like, I'm tired of it, you know? At the same time, I won't live long enough to express or display or even completely learn and understand the things I'm interested in. But yeah, sometimes things ring true and ring false. And I'm obviously, as everyone must be, like, the concept of infinity. You know? I'm deeply concerned with it. And I remember as a youngster, like, I used to always pray. I used to always pray as a young person. It was a children's Bible version of prayer, yet there was a great deal of truth in it because the fundamental, like, people talk about like a bearded man in the sky, or this, that, whatever, but the fundamental concept for me as a child was the idea that God sees and knows everything about you, knows your every thought, knows every hair on your head, and so on. And people are like, there ain't no God and you don't know no every hair on your head. But yet we marvel at regular folk who memorize digits of pi to how long? You know, Dominique O'Brien, all that kind of thing. So could Dominique O'Brien memorize the coordinates of every pinprick on my dome? I'm guessing he could. Is he the highest being? Oh, for all I know, maybe he is, right? But yeah, infinities. My deep discomfort between like math and science. Well, my first deep discomfort is between science and science. Because there's the science of statistics and correlations, and then there's the science of calculus, or that invokes these mathematics. And for that matter, I'm deeply concerned about f of x. F of x is like, it's Descartes, super useful. But like, I'm deeply concerned about it because everything is reduced to like, if it can be an f of x. Not everything, you know, but like, there's all these discrepancies. And like when infinities are invoked, or what we call undefined, if we have an f and if we have an f of x situation, we call it undefined. When infinite rise over run is essentially infinity, but we call it undefined. Yet infinities are the basis of calculus. And then in physics, depending on your model, there are more genres of theories of physics than there are genres of death metal. And there are more genres of death metal than there are people in the world. Like, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. It's the Kunderian graphomania, Milan Kundera. It's just adjective in front of adjective forever. Blah, blah, blah. So it's like some infinity, and then there's the infinities of what's his name? What the heck's his name? The dude who created the math of infinities using Jewish symbols. Starts with a G, I think. What the fuck's that guy's name? Uh, And yeah, he was one of those guys. He gave up, what was it? Because there was Gödel, like Gödel, incompleteness theorem, all that. Super smart, but like he gave up math toward the end of his life because he was so obsessed with the conspiracy. Yeah, what the fuck was that other guy's name though? He was a kind of a Kabbalist, but he was also like a super big mathematician who studied infinities. Anyway, there's this super famous Cantor. And I mean, you know, that supposedly he studied Kabbalah. He was a famous mathematician. His name was Cantor. You have to look that up on your own. And he created a mathematic of infinities using the Hebrew alphabet as mathematical symbols. And super famous like mathematically. Which is it's a hard gig. It's a hard gig to get there. You know. I recommend fully Gary Geck. Gary Geck has pretty much made the best videos on the interweb. I still don't understand him. And I've been watching him for like, I don't know how many years, 10 years, I don't know. Anyway. This uncomfortable with infinities, yet this acceptance of infinities. And what drives me nuts is like empiricists. What drives me nuts is it drives me fucking nuts, like right down to the fucking core. Because you have all these people who are empiricists. Like the most effective means of like infinity that everyone can agree upon is calculus, right? Like calculus is like the type of infinities that everyone can agree upon. Right? Infinities exist in calculus, period. It is people talk about quantum this, quantum that, but it's like Isaac Newton. The most effective, well, never mind Leibniz and all that. Yeah, Gary Geck, But like the most effective infinities exist in calculus that we know of. And everyone agrees upon it. What are those infinities used for? To collapse upon a number. They have an endpoint. They're not a divergence, they're a convergence. They're a convergent infinity. Not that divergencies don't converge. But like that's something we can all agree upon. I mean, it's agreed upon. Whether or not I understand it, I understand enough to know it's agreed upon. So infinities exist. So as an empiricist, like the infinity of infinities, right? The omega point, which is the alpha, Cantor. And it drives me crazy that then empiricists, scientists, certain types of physicists who have a certain take on like, oh, it could be this, it could be that. No, we don't give a fuck what it could be. We give all this equal weight to all these different theories and so on, and like the whole multiverse, infinite multiverse. What? Amongst people who utilize infinities to collapse upon a number. A thing, a unit, a numeral, a name, a numbra. a nomenclature. Like, these infinities collapse upon a thing. And it just drives me nuts about, like, oh, and then we hit here, and then we hit there, and they're like at every decision. But, like, and it's like so disingenuous for, like, scientists to speak of events and decisions as we commonly think of them. In a way as we normally think of decision. But, like, the whole idea that every chemical interaction, every physical interaction in the world creates a new universe. Physically, like, that's just, as far as potentialities, and as far as potentialities, like, that concept exists differently atemporally than it does temporally. But temporality cannot be exceeded. For instance, and this is something I know, I don't need, me personally, I don't need, like, proof or equations or anybody talking. I know it. And I hope to get to the proof of it in some way. And I'm not asking you to take my word for it, but I'm saying I know it. And do your own study. That, so far as time travel is concerned, you can't go back in time and change the timeline. If one goes back in time, if a person, if a woman, if a man comes back in time, comes forward in time, however that happens and intersects the timeline as we know it, is part of the atemporal timeline, because there's a temporal timeline, an atemporal timeline, and eternity. Eternity and atemporality are confused with each other. But if something comes back, like, you can't disrupt the timeline, because if something comes back, it has always came back. Aliens are a big thing on the, aliens are starting to come up, or UFOs in popular conversation more and more lately. But one of the things that doesn't come up in conversation a lot, it comes up some, but, like, that those are versions of us from the future. So, like, why are they quiet? They're quiet because they're specifically trying to raise the attention of people they need in the timeline, such that they are able to affect the timeline such that they are, in being as though they are benevolent now. There may come about a false attack. That's not them. And they may allow it. Though they may intercede. I don't know. But what I do know is that the true ones come back to awaken those who need to help make them, who are ultimately, penultimately, dominant and benevolent. Where dominance and benevolence meets is where we all must meet. Or we will perish. And that's what we need to work for. Each individual who gives a fuck, who gives a big fuck. If you give a fuck, it might not be enough. Like you really gotta give a fuck. Because you might not make it there. I might not make it there. And when I say might, I mean I probably ain't gonna make it there. Or at least that's how I feel, yet at the same time, like there's this force of the Aristotelian final cause, just like, it's not even beckoning to me. It's saying, you're in. Get up.